This model shows us a muscle, a skeletal muscle cell, as well as the motor neuron controlling it. Okay, so let's start with the motor neuron controlling it. What we can see over here is yellow. Yellow is almost always telling us that it is nervous tissue. Right, so this is actually the axon terminal of the motor neuron controlling the skeletal muscle. The motor neuron is surrounded by a myelin sheath, and so here we can see layer after layer after layer of Schwann cell in this case, myelinating this axon. And what we can also see is that in the axon terminal we have lots of these tiny little vesicles here. These are synaptic vesicles filled with acetylcholine. Okay, so when an action potential, of course, travels down the axon to the axon terminal, these vesicles exocytose their neurotransmitters. And where do they do that? They do that into the synapse. So we can see there's this little like gray or light blue right here. That is called the synapse or the synaptic cleft. Okay, the entire muscle cell, it's all this red here, is called the myocyte or myofiber. It is surrounded by a membrane called the sarcolemma. So that is this right here. And we can see that the sarcolemma actually gets a little bit wavy, right next to the axon terminal. And so this here is called the motor end plate, right? Just this wiggly little line. Okay. Within the myocyte or myofiber, we have a series of cylinders, which are actually bundles of proteins. Each of these cylinders is called a myofibril. Right? If we look closely inside these cylinders, we'll see that there are lots of tiny little lines. Those tiny little lines are representing the muscle or the proteins themselves, which are called collectively the myofilaments. Technically, there are actin and myosin myofilaments. And so here we can see these thicker little lines. This is representing a Z disc. This is representing a Z disc, and so from here to way up here, this is called a sarcomere. What we can also learn from this is that these are the actin filaments, and these in here are the myosin filaments. Okay. Moving to the other side of the cell, these structures are actually present throughout the entire cell, but for the sake of the model, they have been reduced to just one side. These little blue tubules here are called the T tubules or transverse tubules. This kind of like mesh lighter color right here, these are the sarcoplasmic reticulum. Together, this part of SR, or sarcoplasmic reticulum, T tubule, and this part of the SR are collectively called the triad. Right, what we can also see throughout the cell are these squiggly little bean-shaped things. These are mitochondria, and keep in mind that muscle contraction is a very energy-intensive process, and so there are tons of mitochondria, and there are also lots of nuclei, so that purple thing there was also a nucleus. The final structure you can actually only see on the back. Right, so this is the sarcolemma, and surrounding the sarcolemma is a connective tissue membrane called the endomysium.